Given your status of a fugitive in the eyes of the United States government, what ethical considerations and or restrictions should guide the media in the United States and elsewhere around the world in reporting on you and your story? Are there different ethical guidelines from country to country? What is your level of satisfaction with such reporting on your story? And has it been equally fair from country to country? So it's a nice kind of comparative media question. So take it away.
So one of the things that I try to be very careful about since June of 2013, when I first came forward, was not telling the media how to do their job. I worked very hard to make sure that I wasn't in the decision loop, that I didn't say what was published or not. In fact, this is something that not everyone understands, but the number of documents that I published, that I made publicly available, has been zero. Instead, I gathered inside the NSA what I believe to be evidence of criminal activity within the government. And this wasn't just in the United States government. This was the Five Eyes Surveillance Alliance, right? This is a transnational spying group consisting of the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. And this is, of course, why we have some understanding now of what was actually going on behind the curtain in Canada about the operations of their sort of surveillance context. And that is, excuse me while I try to find the reference for this here, something that has actually been established in the wake of 2013 with more scrutiny, that Canada actually has the weakest intelligence oversight out of any major Western country. This was something that people didn't really expect. Now, they're not the most aggressive of all countries. They don't have the largest scale. But no one's really watching. There is no real parliamentary understanding of what's happening behind the door. And this is what allowed them to engage in massive sort of indiscriminate surveillance. Dragnet surveillance that was affecting millions of Canadians, that was targeting, for example, the app stores that you might connect to with your phones, things that have now been published and we can now debate, but prior to these disclosures, we didn't really know, right? But here's the idea behind this comparative media question. This was my belief, that these things were violations of human rights, of written statutory laws, or our basic constitutional principles. But what if I was wrong? What if I was just sort of this crazy radical and I had been in my head so long, you know, working in these intelligence places, talking to my coworkers, that I just didn't have a full understanding. Maybe I didn't see the big picture. If I published these things on my own, I believe there was a somewhat larger risk, a greater risk, that I would go too far. And so because of this, I chose instead to replicate the system of checks and balances in our government that had unfortunately failed over time, to try to restore that balance. And the way that I wanted to check myself was to instead provide this archive of documents to journalists, who would then be required, by virtue of gaining access to this archive, to make an independent judgment in every case for every story. Not that it was newsy, not that it was interesting, not that it was just a sexy story, but it was actually in the public interest to know about the details of this operation or that operation, why it mattered, what was going on, and how it was being accomplished, and what this meant for our rights. Now, beyond this, as an additional safeguard to mitigate risks, I wanted these journalists to then go to the governments who are actually carrying out these operations in each case, to allow the government a chance to argue that they didn't understand these stories, that maybe they had gotten the calculus wrong. Maybe there was some detail, some sentence in the story that would actually put a human life at risk just because it was like the, you know, something that a journalist might not recognize, like the employee number of somebody that's a cafeteria worker overseas, but might actually be an intelligence source who could be recognized by these documents. And in every case, this was followed, right? The government didn't get a veto. They couldn't say you can't publish these stories. But they could say, look, this is dangerous or it's not. And this is why in 2016, I believe, the government has never been able to show a single case, credible or incredible, of any evidence that indicates anybody came to harm as a result of this reporting. Now, there's a second dynamic of this question, which is screw the NSA, screw the reporting, screw all the actual stuff that's going on about the surveillance operations, and what's going on with me. Are people being fair to me? Are they covering this way or that way? Are some countries doing better? Some countries doing worse? And of course, this is the case. We have seen in the majority of countries that are not the United States, they've done public polling opinion, and pretty much universally, people have a positive opinion of what I did. The United States government, of course, has been running a very active smear campaign to reduce the level of support for my arguments and for this journalism ever since 2013. And it has been to some extent effective, not fully actually. There's a surprising amount of support. The three largest human rights groups in the world, the ACLU, or the three leading groups, the American Civil Liberties Union, Amnesty International, and Human Rights Watch, are now actually petitioning the President of the United States to drop what the media calls his war on whistleblowers. But here's the central idea there, from my perspective. It doesn't actually matter what people say about me. I am the least important part of this story. And if you're thinking about sort of me, what's happening to me, what my futures look like, you're missing the larger question, which is what happens to all of us.